I feel like Star Wars has always been in my life. I was a Star Wars fan, but I'm also like a big fan of genre, so I always loved sci-fi and fantasy. And so a lot of the things, like as soon as I was able to, when I was working in, on other shows, I really just started following the shows that I personally watched and the ones that I really liked and tried to direct on them. And that somehow ended up leading me to Star Wars. I grew up in Toronto and I did my undergrad in Montreal at McGill, and I was studying like literature and cultural theory and art history, and I didn't honestly know what I was going to do with all of that. And then in my final year there, actually I made a short film for a class, and then I just kind of totally loved it. And I actually did like a rip-off of the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, so it was very gothic and German expression. And then I just kind of fell in love with it, and then I went to film school, but it was a path that I had to find just kind of by making a film. One thing I was grateful for is like I did not have any connection to the film industry at all when I started, and I didn't know anybody. And so the nice thing about that, I think, in a way, is like, say, going to school in Montreal, is that it wasn't about the business at all. It was really just about making films and loving cinema and loving literature and art. And so it started in kind of a very pure way where it really had no connection to an industry or a business. And I think having a really good basis in literature and art and art history and everything, it's an amazing foundation, for filmmaking. And, I think if I'd just been focused on filmmaking, right, from the time I was like 10 or whatever, I might not have had these other influences or had these other things to bring to it. So I think that was hugely beneficial. One thing that allowed me to do, as opposed to like just following a straight feature path, is that I was really forced to, technically to do different styles and to do a different tone in shows that I may never have done if I just stayed on the feature path. And so I really, really came to understand directing as a craft. And it might not be my taste, but I know how to craft it to get that tone or to get that style that they're doing on that show. So I think, just even sort of jumping around the different shows, it just gave me such a thorough understanding of just the directing craft.
I would like to see the baby. It is asleep. Currently it is sleeping.
You may want to check again.
The DNA of Star Wars is always Westerns and samurai films, and I too love Westerns and samurai films, and I was a huge Kurosawa fan. It was really interesting just in terms of directing to go back to these really classic stories where so much of it is visual storytelling, where it can be quite a simple story, but it's very powerful just because it's told so simply and visually. And Mandalorian, I think, for me, I was using those as references all the time. And there's an awful lot of Kurosawa, I think, in Mandalorian underpinning so much of it. Beyond that, what was really cool about Mandalorian was that it was in a different part of the timeline, and it was sort of new characters. So it felt like there was a lot of freedom, with those characters. Mandalorian, it was interesting. Like, honestly, I had been working on quite a number of television shows, and so I went to a meeting and I had no idea actually what I was even there for. So I didn't even know that I was interviewing for Mandalorian at all. And then all of a sudden, John walks in and it was like, oh, they were so secretive about it. So I actually had no clue, and it took a long time for me to figure it out. So I just essentially got hired and then found out.
The fight is done. We lost. Stay hidden.
In retrospect, like compared to Mandalorian, it's the exact opposite, where it's all legacy and it's these big iconic characters, and we're right in between two trilogies in this timeline. So that was sort of the responsibility of it, is that we're straight into canon here with the legacy characters. And we're also in the middle trying to tell the second act of a story where everybody knows what happened before and after. So that really was sort of the biggest challenge, I think, with the series, is, trying to find that story. But it's also what made it very exciting, because we were in a time period where, and it's an interesting time period because it's such a dark time period, where the Empire's in ascendance, there's Inquisitors out, the Jedi are all in hiding. So it was an interesting place to start the series, and it was exciting to have these big characters and be telling a new chapter. I think one of the biggest starting points for us was that when we looked at Kenobi and we looked at his character, we're just going, who's important in his life and what was meaningful in his past. And coming out of Revenge of the Sith, Anakin and Vader obviously are one of the most pivotal things, and coming out of, you know, what happened in Mustafar was incredibly strong for him. So we're bringing that baggage into this show, and that's part of our starting place. So that's in large part why we decided to bring back Vader and to bring back Hayden, is that we felt that it was intrinsic to actually what he was carrying into this show, you know, that all these issues coming from it. So, you know, the emotional relationship to them is the main reason we brought back Vader. And, you know, and that I felt so strongly about bringing back Hayden is that coming out, I felt like you couldn't do it justice without that because of what had happened at the end of Revenge of the Sith. Honestly, that was one of the major draws for me on this project, and that was the thing that I was the most excited about. And I loved the idea, similar to, you know, how they've done something like Logan or Joker, of taking one character out of a big franchise, and then also with a limited series, having the time to really go in depth and have it be character driven, and then having an actor like Ewan, who's just has such an amazing range, and he just brings such an emotion and depth to everything. That was really the biggest draw of the whole project for me. When I started the series, you know, and obviously I was coming off of Mandalorian, and it was a very, you know, different corner of the galaxy with that. I did do a pretty deep dive, and I looked at a lot of the stuff in the extended universe. And for me, I was really trying to just kind of feel the tone, or, you know, what does this feel like? You know, what is this character at this moment in his life? Like, what feels right? And so I looked at quite a bit. I read that book. You know, I thought he did a lovely job in the book. There was nothing that became specific to the series, but I feel like so much of the work that's been done just contributed in general to us, you know, understanding him on a deeper level and feeling what the character should be like. I think the biggest thing, especially with something that has, you know, this much scrutiny and everybody's so intent and the fan base is so passionate about it, when we were trying to develop the story, the only thing you can do is really try to be as honest and be as genuine as from the starting place, that it has to come out of the character and it has to fit the story. And one thing Joby and I would do, Joby's the writer, is really always do sort of a reality check to go, if we take the Star Wars out of this, does this still work? You know, it's still got to work on a human level. And that's because there's a lot of people that might watch the show that don't know that much or don't remember it that well. So it also has to work on a human level. So I think that's always helped me, is just to always keep going back to, does this work anyway? But I think the biggest thing is just, I think if you think of the big picture and you start thinking about the fans and the reception and everything, it can be overwhelming. So I just kind of try to focus on the work and just try to take it a step at a time and just keep trying to do it as best I can. I think the biggest thing in the best possible way, the story that we were trying to tell, is to tell a really personal, emotional story, but sort of against an epic scope and have a big canvas for it. I think with characters like Obi-Wan Kenobi and Vader, they're so mythic unto themselves and they're so iconic that you do need a bit of the mythic world with them to support them. But I think what I'd love for the fans to take away from this is to feel it emotionally, to feel this journey in a way that maybe they haven't in other properties.